For added insights and a full collection of episodes from Small Business Edge, visit ceteris.com/podcast. Amanda, it's so awesome to be talking with you today, because I kind of see you as, for those who don't know, you and I work together within the context of Praxis. You're one of our advisors, and you work with a lot of our participants who are doing their apprenticeship. And I rely on you quite a bit because you are such a versatile advisor. You teach people how to do yoga. You help run a yoga studio. You record podcasts. You're a world traveler. You create a lot of video content. You are a graphic designer. You do so many different things. And I kind of want to dive into a little bit of that today, but I want to take a break from our usual discussions on how you help other people achieve their goals. And I want to hear from you about how you actually live the entrepreneurial mindset in your own life. So I'd like to start by just kind of having you tell us when you became the entrepreneurial person that we know you to be today.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that I kind of always imagined myself working for myself. My parents have owned a business my entire life, so I saw the hustle side of it, like the late hours and the crazy schedules and the, having to take a call on Sunday and rush into the office type thing. But I also saw the flexibility of, we can take a vacation now and nobody needs to approve it because, my dad's the CEO of this company and he gets to make the rules type thing. And I saw my mom being able to pick us up from lunch when we were in elementary school and that sort of thing. So I think it always interests me to work for myself. And then after I graduated from university, I dove into a corporate business marketing job. And I just hated that I was confined to somebody else's schedule. I was like, I have to be in this office, even when I'm done my work, even when, I could be doing other things with my time. And I just felt like this is not how I want to live my life. And so at that point, I was really trying to think about, what do I want to do? What things do I enjoy doing? And at that point, I kind of thought I wanted to be a professional travel blogger, which is something that I do, but it's not something that drives most of my revenue or my income right now. So my boyfriend and I, quit our jobs, sold our stuff, went to South America, started a travel podcast and started a travel blog. And it's something we still do. It's been almost 4 years, but it's very much like a side hustle, a side project. And along the way with that, I discovered my passion for yoga and became a yoga teacher. And within that, I discovered that I could combine my love of the business world, which is what my background was before, with my passion for yoga and help yoga teachers build their businesses and create a sustainable income. The thing that I found when I entered the yoga industry was that everyone was like, I'm broke constantly, I'm poor, I'm hustling my ass off constantly, and I don't have enough money. And I was just like, people are paying like $19 to $25 for a drop-in class. Like, how are we not making money in this industry? And the more I dove into it, on the studio management side and getting to know the back end of it, I was like, it's because they don't know how to market themselves, sell themselves, build programs, talk to studio owners about raises, all these things. And then kind of a light bulb went off for me and I was like, I could do this for this industry. And that's kind of where I started with that.
That's a really interesting thing. So it sounds like in the yoga world, it's kind of similar to like the artist world. Everybody has these internal conversations about how broke they are. And there's a lot of need for entrepreneurial thinking. So I'm curious to know more about this. You said a lot of the problems came down to marketing, but you also said people were paying high prices. So was it they just weren't getting enough customers? That's why most of them were broke?
It's kind of interesting. I think that on the studio owner side, a lot of times studio owners start owning studios because they think that that's the way to make money in the yoga industry. And it's certainly one way to make money, but at the same time, it's still a brick and mortar business. And so you have to understand how to run a brick and mortar business, which in most cases, studio owners don't. And so they get into this business, they put a lot of money into it, and then they realize, oh, I have to pay property taxes and I have to pay all of my staff. And oh no, somebody's got to clean this place. And oh, right, I need an accountant and all these things. And then everything just kind of breaks down. Like they assume that everyone's just going to come to their studio, but you need to market it. You need to sell your programs, your workshops, that sort of thing. You have to manage your teachers. Like, for example, the studio that I work for that's based out of Canmore, Alberta, a teacher didn't show up for a class. There was a miscommunication with subbing this past Saturday. He was woken up out of a nap and rushed to the studio. He got there just 15 minutes late and he had to teach the class. Like that's literally like the types of stuff you have to do when you're a studio owner. And so, he's a really great example of one, and I absolutely love working with him. But there's people who just don't realize that that's the hustle, that you're there late, you're, unclogging toilets at times, you're stacking bolsters and blocks, and it's not always this like idyllic lifestyle. So that's part of it on the studio owner side. And then with the teacher side, I think it's not recognizing that you're your own boss. You're not necessarily an employee for these studios. You're an entrepreneur and you work for yourself. But instead, yoga teachers have this mindset of, oh, I work for this studio or these couple of studios and I have to do, everything that they want me to. And I only get paid what they say I'm going to. And they create my schedule and they kind of give the power to the studio owners. And I'm really all about being your own boss and being an entrepreneur and taking control of your schedule and making sure that you're finding things that fit with your lifestyle, that you're getting paid enough to be happy, that you're creating a schedule that's going to work for your life and that sort of thing. So that's kind of my mindset around that.
So you clearly have a lot of knowledge about how to help people take their studio management game to the next level. But tell us how you made that transition from being the person who sees all of these weaknesses in people's game and you can help them to actually getting them to hire you to be their consultant.
Yeah, definitely. So it actually kind of happened the opposite way around. Like I was actually working for a studio before I got my yoga teacher training, and it's a small studio. There's, I think maybe like 10 or 15 teachers, and then there's 3 studio managers. And like I mentioned, the studio owner is amazing. He has an engineering background. He came from kind of like a business corporate world into yoga, and he's very, business minded. And one of the amazing things about being one of the studio managers was that he always comes to us with questions and, can you kind of give me advice on this, or what are your thoughts on this? And we've had lots of really great open discussions about studio management. And he taught me so much about the industry. So I started actually working that job before I was a yoga teacher. And then I added my yoga teacher training to the mix and started teaching, and I got that side of it as well. And just the more experience I got in the industry, the more I was able to learn from people and then teach people. But one of the things that I did do was I started my podcast, which is M.B.Om. It's Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I started reaching out to people who were successful in the industry, because what I wanted to teach the average yoga teacher was that you can be successful in the industry. You can create a sustainable income. You can do this full time for the rest of your life. You don't have to be on food stamps and, hustling to serve at night and then getting up super early to teach. Like you can do this full time if you want to. And so now I've interviewed almost 100 people. And so I've spent like hours and hours talking to people about what they do and learning so much. And I feel like I've gained so much knowledge from that. So now I'm able to transfer that to other people that I work with. And that's how I've started working with, another studio. And I work with a number of yoga teachers one-on-one and in group settings and that sort of thing.
One of the things you mentioned was the person who's in a scenario where they're busting tables at night to make their way in the world, and maybe they're doing their yoga thing by day, and you're saying, hey, you can do this full time if you go about it in the right way. Mm-hmm. For the person who's in that situation, how do you even begin to make that transition? I mean, because that sounds pretty tough, right? I mean, you don't want to leave your job and just go all in when you can't guarantee the money will be there. When do you know that you should take the leap, and how do you take it?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. And I think that it's going to be a little bit different for everyone depending on your situation. It's certainly different if you've got, student loan debt and a mortgage, maybe kids, especially if you're like a single parent, for sure, it's going to be different because you've got, other people who are counting on you versus if you're somebody like me where you're, you don't have any dependents, you don't have student loans, you don't have mortgage payments and that sort of thing. But I think one of the big things to do is to look at your income and look at your budget. So I actually like to suggest backwards budgeting. So looking at like how much you need to survive, how much you're spending, and then figure out how much of what you're currently making is in the yoga industry and how much is maybe in another industry, whether or not it's like bussing tables or maybe you've got like a side gig that you want to let go of, and figure out, say you're making $1,000. That's an easy number to work with. $1,000 extra a month from this other job that you're doing. So that means you need to make $1,000 more in the yoga industry to continue living comfortably at the pace that you're living. And I think that that works a little bit better than being like, okay, how can I cut, everything out? Because at the end of the day, sustainability when it comes to our career means we can live comfortably. It means that we can occasionally go and have that $5 latte or buy that Whole Foods guacamole. It's like whatever you need to be comfortable, because if we're consistently like, oh, I can't afford that, then it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable in the long term, because we're going to start resenting it because we can't, have these little things that we like occasionally. So if you've got this number and like, okay, I need to make $1,000 extra dollars, you can start looking at what you can do in the industry in order to make that extra money. So you can look at, okay, could I start subbing more classes? Is there opportunities at the studios I currently teach at to take on more classes? Is there opportunities to start running a workshop every month? And just start looking at like, what could I be doing to make, 12,000 extra dollars per year. And I would actually say that you need to start getting those things on your schedule and start making those things happen before you quit your job, unless you've got like a backlog of money, because it's always slower than you think it's going to be.
So everybody has this one thing that you can only know if you do something for a living that everybody else just thinks about in the completely wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
What is that for your industry? When someone decides they want to go into this, what's the most common mistake, that easiest thing to overlook that you almost always have to teach people?
Oh man, there's a couple different ones that come to mind, but I think, going with this idea of being sustainable and making an income, I think that's something that people really struggle with, is this idea that, I got into teaching yoga not because I wanted to be rich, but because I wanted to teach this thing I'm really passionate about. This is something I hear all the time. Like, I shouldn't ask for more money because if this is truly what I love doing, I don't need to make more money in order to be happy to do it. Certainly, that's fine. But at the same time, we all deserve to have a roof over our head and make enough money to eat. And it's really, really interesting because you would never approach your accountant and say, hey, do you mind doing my taxes for free? Like, would you just do a little bit of my taxes just for free? Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's a very common thing in the yoga industry. People are like, well, I can't really afford to pay you one-on-one. Would you just come to my house and teach me? And it's like, no, just because you love doing this thing doesn't mean you should be doing it without any, monetary or some sort of exchange in return. It's your profession, it's your career. And you would never ask your hairdresser or your accountant, I would never ask my hairdresser, hey, would you just cut my hair for free? I can't really afford to pay you. So would you just cut it for free? Would you just do my taxes for free? And I think that needs to be applied to the yoga industry. And the reason, or the way that I think we can do that, is by yoga teachers really enforcing that. I would love to come teach you. I would love to work with you, but, unfortunately I can't do it for free. Here's my rates. This is what I charge. Are you interested in working together?
So there's an interesting debate on this whole idea of free work. Some people say offering your work for free is a great way to build your network, gain respect, and recruit customers that you wouldn't otherwise have. And then there are those who are very adamant about never, ever work for free, or people won't respect your value. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I know that this is something that we talk about in the Praxis community quite a bit, especially with young people when you don't have any experience. And I absolutely, agree with the things we talk about in Praxis, which is, there is a time and a place to do things for free. When you're brand new at something and you have no experience, you are probably not going to get the same rates as somebody who's been doing it for 15 years. So if you're a web designer and you have no experience, but you want to get into this industry, do a couple websites for free, get that portfolio experience, and then you can start charging more. And then as you have more portfolio experience and you're better at it, you can charge even more. And I think that applies to the yoga industry as well. When you're a new teacher and you have no experience, I think that it's, absolutely a time and a place to maybe do some teaching for free, or ask for those exchanges. I suggest to new yoga teachers, teach whoever you can. Teach your grandfather, even if he can't get up, teach him in a chair, teach your dad, teach your dog, teach your sister, teach your little brother, teach every single person that you can teach, and don't expect to get paid for that. But there comes a point where, you're gaining this experience, and all of a sudden you can approach a studio owner and you can say, I've been a teacher for 6 months. This is all the experience that I've gained. And absolutely, you should be getting paid for that. So I think that it's kind of this fine line of asking for money for your services, but also knowing that when you're brand new at something, there is value in just getting that experience right off the get-go.
Yeah, our colleague, Chuck Grimmett, recently wrote an article called Compare to What? And he talked about this idea of, when you're looking at a possibility, don't consider it in isolation. Don't just ask yourself, should I work for free? Ask yourself, compare it to what? Do I have an offer on the table to work for $500? Then, well, maybe I don't want to work for free. Compare it to what, as opposed to just, look at it as, free or not free in these kind of binary and absolute terms.
Yeah, I like that mode of thinking. Like, it's kind of like, if you're at a position where you can't get any paid teaching gigs, is it better to just sit at home and not teach, or is it better to get out there and teach your community even if you're not making money? Because I think that there's other exchanges other than monetary. Something I suggest for new yoga teachers, actually any yoga teacher, to do is see if you can work out some exchanges in your community. Like, you would never ask your hairdresser to cut your hair for free, but what if you asked your hairdresser to cut your hair in exchange for a private yoga lesson? I actually exchanged a private yoga lesson with, the girl who did my logo design for M.B.Om. And that was a really fun way for me to get some more teaching experience, and for her to do, get some graphic design experience, and then also get a yoga lesson. And it worked really well for the both of us.
One of the hardest things about starting a small business, buying a franchise, is that you have a already existing lifestyle that you need to leave behind, or that you need to transition away from. So I like to talk more about how you manage all of the things you have going on in your life in order to be able to sustain the kind of work you're talking about. Because, one of the things you mentioned was things like, you may be a single mother, right? Or you may be, married and have kids, or you may also be in school. You may also have a full-time job that you can't quit. So let's dive into your workflow a little bit and see what we can learn from what your day looks like when you wake up in the morning, how you manage your time, and everything that you've got going on outside of managing these two yoga studios.
Yeah, definitely. So every day is a little bit different, which I really like. I worked a corporate job for a number of years where it was very the same every day, and I absolutely didn't like that. So I like that I've got lots of different projects on the go, but it definitely challenges me in terms of my scheduling. It would be very easy for me to forget about one of my projects. Like, for example, being like, oh, right, I have advising sessions with Praxis tonight. Shoot, I just no-showed all of my, all my participants, which is absolutely not acceptable. And so one of my
never done, for the record.
No. And I would never do that. I'm pretty against people doing that to me. So absolutely need to walk the talk. But one of the things that I have is a pretty structured calendar system. I find my phone really distracting. So I actually use a paper day timer. I use a passion planner, which is fun because it's got quotes and nice space to write notes and that sort of thing. But I find that anything that allows me to lay out my week is really important. One thing I do is I do lay out my week on Sunday nights. Somebody I interviewed on my podcast recently actually called it like the power hour. So an hour on Sunday nights. And I know it's something that's, come up in the Praxis community, like Sunday is the new Monday, like use your Sunday to get ahead for the week. And I absolutely love that. I've been doing that for a while, and I think it makes my Mondays way, way better than they used to be, when I would, roll out of bed and be like, oh God, what's happening this week? Like the world just like smacked me in the face. And now I can roll out of bed and say, I'm going to conquer this. So that's definitely something I do. I have everything written out. So I call them pivot points. These are the things that I have to do. Like, for example, a pivot point is you and I talking. So, I travel a lot, which means I know that at that time I need to be in a quiet space with good Wi-Fi and, my microphone ready to go and my headphones and that sort of thing. And I have pivot points for everything that I do in my life. So podcast interviews, one-on-one calls, calls with the studio managers studio owners that I work with. My Praxis advising sessions are a pivot point. And I use this to kind of break out my day. So basically I can look at what my day looks like and say, okay, I've got TK at 11 a.m. and then I've got a podcast interview at 1 p.m. I need call boosts for those. And, this is the work I'm going to do in between. And so I have, my daily to-dos, and then I have an ongoing to-do list that kind of fills up my time outside of that. And so that's kind of how I structure that. But if that sounds kind of complicated and convoluted, I actually worked with a business coach when I first started working remotely. I kind of dove into this like entrepreneur life. I was working at Lululemon for a while and teaching yoga. And I was like, you know what? I'm sick of selling stretchy pants. I need to do my own thing now. And just kind of dove in. And I recognized that I had basically no skills to work for myself. I was public schooled. I went straight to college. I worked for somebody else for from the time I was like 22 to 26. And then I was like, okay, it's like somebody needs to teach me how to like be my own boss. And, he worked me through setting up my schedule, holding myself accountable, setting deadlines and that sort of thing. And that really, really helped me.
I actually like the direction we're going in. Let's delve a little bit more into the nuts and bolts of your life. So the two yoga studios, how many days a week or hours per week on average are you dedicated to like physically being there and doing the training?
Yeah, so I actually work remotely for both of them. So I don't need to be there for either of them in any capacity. I've actually never been to the one studio that I work for. The other one is in Canada. It's in my hometown, or where I call home when I am home. So I do more projects for them that are in person when I am there. But everything I do can be done anywhere in the world where I have Wi-Fi, which is really amazing. And I work about 5 or so hours with each yoga studio per week. And that includes, I have a regular call with both of the studio owners to talk about things. And basically how it's set up is I have pretty like dedicated projects that I work on. Obviously different stuff comes up, but I've been able to sort of manage my schedule around that. So for example, with the studio that I work for in Canada, I do inbox management for them twice a week. So Saturdays and Sundays are my days to give one of the other studio managers a break. So I know it's in my day timer, like yoga lounge, inbox management, Saturday, Sunday. So I know that I need to check their voicemail. I need to monitor their social media. I need to make sure their inbox is cleared out, at the end of each day. And so I just keep that open for those days. And then something else we're doing right now is a yoga challenge, and those emails need to go out on Sunday morning, and that's my responsibility. So that's also in my planner. So I know I need like a dedicated hour or two on Sundays to make sure I do that work. For the other studio I work for, I do their social media and email marketing, and I schedule their social media on Sunday nights. So that's part of my like Sunday night ritual. I double check it on Mondays, and then I do their email newsletter draft on Mondays. So that's kind of like my dedicated time that I work for them. And then the rest of my days are kind of dedicated to other things. Like, for example, it's Friday today. Friday is my podcast editing day. So I do my podcast editing for M.B.Om because it goes out on Mondays. Thursdays, my boyfriend and I's travel podcast goes out. So Thursdays, there's always a bit of like World Wander stuff to do. Tuesdays are my Praxis office hours. So I always have like Tuesday nights cleared out for office hours and any calls I need to do with that. So I've kind of set up my schedule to go with the different projects that I do.
I think you're touching on something very important implicitly that gets overlooked for people that want to do these kinds of things, whether it's run a podcast or do remote work or do coaching or training. And this comes up in Praxis a lot, is you can have, let's say, 4 coaching sessions in a day. Those coaching sessions only have a 30-minute block of time apiece. And it looks like a pretty easy day when you look at the calendar, especially if they're spaced out well. But once you actually dive into it, it gets really tough really fast because, first of all, you have to be planted in the same place. There are a whole lot of things that you just don't have time to do because those calls exist on your calendar. There's prep work that goes into getting ready for the calls. There's follow-up work that goes into, making sure you reinforce what you discussed during the calls. All sorts of things, billing, invoicing, documenting things for your team that you work with. Talk a little bit more about some of the work that's necessary to do the work.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a great thing to talk about. I think that, my partner Ryan and I were talking about this the other day because he works with Praxis as well, and he does a lot of calls. And we were talking about how, it seems really idyllic, just like you said, to have, a call at 10 and then a call at 11 and then a call at 1 and, I'll take a nice lunch break in between. But there is so much that goes into it. And it's actually really hard to get other work done when you've only got about 45 minutes in between, because there is very much like a mindset shift. Like you need to prep for your call, like you said. There's nothing worse than showing up to a one-on-one with somebody and having no idea what you're talking about with them or no idea what they're up to. And, for me, as somebody who's like, they're paying for my time. And I'm like, sorry, what do you do? Who do you work for? Where do you live? Like, who are you? It just doesn't feel like very good. So for me, with any of my coaching, whether or not it's my yoga business coaching or my Praxis coaching, I always spend time beforehand looking over, my follow-up emails from the last time we've talked, or, what they're working on, or that sort of thing, like getting my head kind of in the game for what that conversation is going to look like. And then of course there's the after part of it. And I actually like to schedule to do follow-up emails the day after calls. So I like to keep my mornings pretty clear for like kind of my own time, like my morning routine or answering emails, that sort of thing. And then kind of have my calls like later in the day. But I find that there's like nothing better than like, I don't drink coffee anymore, but like pouring a cup of matcha or a cup of bone broth or like a green tea or something and just sitting down and like cranking out those emails, because I can do it in a really peaceful way. And then it's not like end of the day where I'm like, oh God, I'm slogging through this email. But I think that there is, that before and after. And I think that if there's any yoga teachers out there listening, it's the same thing when it comes to yoga classes. People think like, okay, great, I'll just schedule 4 yoga classes in a day and it's going to be super chill. But, for yoga teachers, there's driving time, there's prep time. You don't just show up and walk in 5 minutes early and teach a class. Like you have to prep that class. You have to greet your students. You have to check them in. You have to get the room set up. You need to kind of like create the ambiance, whether or not it's like incense or essential oils or like warming the room up or laying out some props or turning some music on. There's like all this other stuff that goes into what you're doing. And then there's always after. And you have to take care of yourself as well. So there's like the decompression part as well. So when you do a lot of like calls or in-person work, you need to give yourself that time to like, okay, now I'm breathing and kind of like letting that go before I dive into like the next person or the next thing I'm doing.
This actually connects very well with what you had to say earlier about the importance of charging for your services, even if you don't care about being rich, because that's just an aspect of taking care of yourself and making sure you're more mentally available for a client. If you're meeting with the client and you're anxious about a bill that needs to be paid or things are tight financially and you're a little uncomfortable, that's going to transfer to your client. And a huge part of what you do is just making sure you do the prep work and all of those things necessary to be available. So when they are there, they feel like you're the only thing that's on their mind,
Yeah, 100%. I think that, if you're say I've heard yoga teachers making as little as $15 for a class. And like, sure, you think like $15 an hour, that's not like a terrible salary, but there's all this other stuff that goes in it. Like you want your yoga teacher to show up 30 minutes early. You want them to do all that prep work. If you're a newer yoga teacher, it can take up to like an hour to create a great sequence because you want to run through it and maybe practice teaching it and that sort of thing. And then there's the after part. You stay, you talk to your students, you engage with them. And so with all that said and done, you're spending like 3 or 4 hours just for one class, and you divide that up and you're like, well, of course I'm not making enough money. Like, what is that? Like $4, $4.50? Like just absolutely crazy. And then with that, it becomes the resentment. You start resenting it. Like, oh, I don't want to put all this extra effort into this because I'm not making enough off of it, or I don't feel like compensated, whether or not it's monetary or something else. And I think it's the same way when it comes to, coaching or one-on-one work. Like, if somebody's paying me $15 for my call, I'm probably not going to do that much prep work. I'm probably not going to put that much effort into my follow-up. Whereas if I feel like, I'm more than fairly compensated, or, this person's really like paying me for my time, like I'm going to, make sure that they have like the best damn follow-up email that they can refer to until we talk to again. And they're going to have every single action item that they need to do. And that's really where I want to come from as somebody working with people, which means then when I sit down and have a conversation with people, it's like, I absolutely will not work with you for free.
You're doing a lot of stuff, helping a lot of people. And in the midst of all of this, you're still making a tremendous amount of time for your own personal travel passions. Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, definitely. Something that is really important to me is making sure that I do have some balance in my life and that I make sure that I'm still doing the things that I love. So travel is one of my main passions. I've been traveling since I was a little girl, but, on my own or with my partner, Ryan, since 2011, we've been traveling off and on. And we made the transition, I guess, a year and a half to 2 years ago of being fully remote. So we both work entirely remotely, which is so amazing. And we just travel the world. We find places that we want to live for a couple of months or we want to visit for a couple of weeks and are able to do that. And it's definitely been an interesting transition. Like I used to be a backpacker, like quit my job, do whatever I want all day, every day. And sometimes I certainly miss those days. When I get together with somebody who's, say, coming through Mexico City and they're like, hey, I'm going to go do this cool thing on Wednesday. And I'm like, no, I work on Wednesdays. I can't do that anymore. I've got a job, or I've got multiple jobs, and people depend on me and I need income. So I can't do that. Sometimes I do miss that life, but I really like the balance of being able to do something cool, like live in Mexico City where I live right now. So for example, when I walk out of this call booth, everything in my life is in Spanish. I can go get really great tacos for like $2. And, then I can walk back into WeWork and bust out my work in English and make good money and work with cool people and that sort of thing. So that's sort of what the balance looks like right now. We try to take like a weekend trip to somewhere else in Mexico or somewhere near here every month. And yeah, that's kind of what that looks like.
All right. So for those listening who feel like, I want to live a little bit more of this lifestyle you're describing here, I want to have that kind of autonomy, creative freedom, and entrepreneurialism in my life, what's one parting piece of advice you'd offer?
I think that it would be to find something that you are really passionate and excited about. I think it's certainly not easy. Like there's been, I've talked about it from a place of like how much I love it and how much I know about it and that sort of thing, but there have definitely been numerous moments where I'm like, what the hell have I got myself into? Maybe I should just go back to Canada and get a full-time job. They paid me every 2 weeks. I got benefits. I had to leave. I got paid to go on holidays. So it's certainly not easy. So I think that when you're thinking about any type of entrepreneurial endeavor or starting a business or diving into, building a life where you have more freedoms, you also have to know that it's going to be hard and that it requires hustle. So, certainly it's amazing that I can live somewhere like Mexico City, but it also means that I work a lot. Like we went away for a couple of days last week and it was my birthday and I was like, I'm going to do no checking emails on my birthday. But it's like virtually impossible for me not to check emails because, it's my reputation on the line when somebody emails me about a podcast interview or working together or a course I've created and I don't respond to them. Like that's a sale I've lost, which means like I can't take more holidays. So there's definitely a side of it that's not so glamorous that I think people don't see through things like social media and that sort of thing. They see this like laptop lifestyle, digital nomad life, like, oh, I'm working at the pool today. And that's, not really the reality of it. It's definitely a hustle and there are amazing aspects to it, but you do have to hustle. So I think that in any entrepreneurial thing you do, just make sure that you're super passionate about it because if you're getting into it for the wrong reason, I think it's gonna kick you in the butt a little bit.
Yeah, I like that last point you made because people often suppose that following your passion is about how often it will feel good. And it's really more about the fact that it will inevitably feel bad. And it's the thing you've done for your own reasons that will empower you to get through it. If you're doing something because someone else made you do it or to make them proud, as soon as it gets tough, you just kind of flame out. But if you said, no, this is something I believe in, it's definitely going to stop feeling good for some periods of time. But you kind of have that conviction to move you forward and make it worth your while.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to compare the like slumps in sort of entrepreneurial life versus the slumps when you work for somebody else. I think that there are definitely those low points in both, but I think it just feels really different because, when I worked for somebody else, when I worked in corporate, it was like, I'd just be like, what am I doing? Like, I don't really want to be doing this. And that was kind of how the slump felt, like almost a disappointment in myself that I wasn't doing, what I felt like I should be doing or what I felt like I really wanted to be doing. Whereas now when I have the slumps, it's like, I can come back to my why. Like, why did I do this? Like, I chose this. Nobody pushed me down this path. In fact, more people have told me not to do it than have told me to do it. Like my parents have expressed like, a lot of concern, like, Amanda, you're 29 years old. What are you doing with your life? Like, you need to like have enough money to get a mortgage and you need to get married and start popping out babies and like do these things. And I'm like, no, I'm going to keep traveling the world and like working for myself. So, it's definitely harder in that way. But I think that when you hit those low points, you can really look at like, why did I decide to do this? And do I want to keep doing it? And I always come back to like, this is why, these are my reasons why I decided to do it. And it fires me up. So then it's like, I can come out of those slumps feeling like excited by the choices I've made instead of feeling like, why am I working in this job?
Well, Amanda, I'm glad that you have chosen to take a path that makes your mother a little nervous because you've inspired a lot of people. And you've helped a lot of people realize their own potential. If people want to follow up on you and check out your content or maybe pursue you as a trainer or a coach, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so my website is M.B.Om So it's M.B.O.M And you can send me an email at info@mbomyoga.com or find me on any social media platform. It's Mastering the Business of Yoga.
All right, Amanda, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much, TK.
Cheers. For added insights and a full collection of episodes from Small Business Edge, visit ceteris.com/podcast.